Starting in verse 23. Now during those many days the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. And God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight and why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. And then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. It's the word of the Lord. We're going through this series, like I said last week, looking at this story. Last week we looked at the beginning of the story, chapter 1, when the people are enslaved, the Hebrew people are enslaved, and looked at the idea of liberation. What does it mean to be liberated from their slavery, but from our, whatever enslaves us as well? And we looked at sort of the narrative of the people. And today, if you imagine, the spotlight is going to turn and going to look at Moses. And the spotlight's going to be on Moses and his reaction to this burning bush. And if this is one of the most famous stories in all the Bible. And even if you've never opened the Bible or never come to church, you've heard this story of the burning bush. Maybe you watch Prince of Egypt or the Ten Commandments. You've seen this burning bush, the story of the burning bush. And it's a very fascinating story. It's actually very theologically rich. It's a beautiful story because here's what it's talking about. It's talking about the first time that Moses has a true spiritual encounter with God. See, we know that he was probably raised for the first 3 to 4 years of his life in a series of events by his Hebrew mother, and he was probably raised as a Hebrew to know the Hebrew God. So he knows God. His father's a priest. He knows this God of the Bible. He knows the God of his forefathers. He knows it intellectually. He knows it. He believes in him. He would even say, I believe. But the burning bush represents the first time that he gets a real spiritual encounter. He gets a taste of what spiritual reality looks like. See, here's the problem with all of us, and even me as a pastor. Life is life. You wake up, you go to work, you come home from work, you go to sleep. You wake up, repeat, rinse, recycle, repeat over and over again. And through that, there's a tendency to get wrapped up into life and to say, yes, I believe in God, but I don't know if I have the experience of him. See, it was one thing for Moses to say, I know God in my head, but he hasn't actually lit my heart on fire to do anything. He hasn't sent me in another direction, and it's the burning bush that does it. It's a spiritual encounter. He's encountering God for the first time, and it's going to change his life. And there are going to be lessons for you and I for this. for our burning bush. And I want to focus on this burning bush today. I want us to examine, what does it mean to have a real spiritual encounter with God? Not just to know him, not just to believe in him, but to have the sense of him on your heart, to have the experience of him. Moses gets it, and it's fascinating, and it changes his life forever. So let's look at this morning. This is the way I want to do it, and I know this is going to sound entirely confusing, and it's meant to be a little bit. We're going to look at this bush, and I'm under 3 headings, and you have them on your outline if you want to follow along. We're going to call it the bush that's burning, the bush that burns, and the bush that doesn't burn. Say that 5 times fast. The bush that's burning, the bush that burns, I can't even get it right, and the bush that doesn't burn. I'm just trying to make sure you're still with me here. What do I mean by this? I know, a little weird. Let's pour into this first. What does it mean to have a spiritual experience? What does it mean to encounter the burning bush in your life? Read back, if you have your Bibles, go back to the beginning of the story. And there's an interesting thing that's so subtle and yet so significant in Hebrew that you're most likely to miss over it. And it's a very, very odd word that's used. And it's repeated, so you know when anything's repeated in the Bible in a story, you might as well should pay attention to it. Do you notice what he does when he has the burning bush? It says that he turns aside. And then it says when God saw that, he turned aside. And you could easily miss this. This Hebrew word is actually a word that means something more like turn off the road, to turn off the path. See, the burning bush for Moses, his spiritual encounter, the first step of what it took was to turn off the path. It means, this word, if it was a modern day word, it might say something like you're on a highway and you take the exit ramp before you expected to take the exit ramp. You take a detour. See, Moses is about to take a major life detour. In fact, he already has taken a macro detour. If you go back in the story, we didn't read it today, we didn't have time, but he grows up in the Egyptian court, right? He's the son of Pharaoh, with all the powers and privileges therein implied. He's got a great life ahead of him. And the day after he becomes an adult, he says, he goes out and in an impetuous, rash act, he murders somebody, and he's sent to the wilderness. He has to flee. See, Moses, the burning bush, what is it first? It is a burning bush, meaning it's something in your life that makes you take notice, and something, and here's the catch, that's most likely going to put you on a detour from what you expected your life to be. See, Moses had all the privilege of the court, but he gets sent into the wilderness on detour, exit ramp. I'm sure he didn't plan his life to be that way, but look what God was doing all along. And here he gets the burning bush, and it literally says he turns aside. You see what Moses could have done? Moses could have said, burning bush, very interesting, but I'm busy. I must tend to my sheep. If you know the life of Moses up to this point, he's got a pretty good life. Yeah, he's in the wilderness, but he's married, he's got a child, he's got a secure income, a steady job. I'm sure he thinks, I can cruise control through my life, and I will tend to sheep all my life. And God says, no, I will put a burning bush into your life. That'll be a detour for you. It'll make you go on a path that you never thought that you were going to go into, but it's a path that's infinitely better than you ever could have dreamed or imagined. See, the burning bush in your life and in my life are those times when God comes down heavy and says, you think you're going that way? I'm going to put you this way. You think you're going to zig? I'm going to zag you. Now, let me give a story. And you know, if you come to Soul Grace at any time, believe it or not, I don't like talking about myself up here, because I find that when preachers do talk about themselves from the pulpit, it becomes so very self-aggrandizing, and this microphone's a very big temptation for you to just go on and on about your own life. So I try to tap the brakes and not tell you too much about me, and not spend too much time on me, but I want to give an example of what my burning bush, one of my burning bushes was. And then maybe you can relate to it, maybe you can't, but maybe it'll help you identify the burning bush in your life, maybe now, or maybe the ones that are going to come. See, I never wanted to be a pastor. I was never supposed to be up here. Never in a million years did I think that this is where I would end up. And I swore up and down that I wouldn't do it. See, I was a young chap, a young man. I went off to New York City to follow fortune and fame. I went to college in New York. And I figured this is the path for me. I was starting to get in the music business. And the music business in New York City for an 18, 19-year-old guy is incredibly fun. It's parties, it's networking, it's connections. And I started to look at the executives that I was working for at different record companies and started to think, look how much money they have. This is the life for me. Stamp it, done, I've chosen it, that's what I want. And so I did nothing, my grades suffered. I did nothing but work to that end. I said, this is surely the path for me. And then my burning bush came. It was junior year of my college, and it was probably the worst year of my entire life. Family financial problems, I was going to be forced to leave school, this prestigious university, and I had no options in front of me. I screwed up and I lost my job, essentially blackballing me from a lot of circles that I was in at the time. Remember, business is all about networking. I was a poor, broke student this time. I had no job. Friends didn't come to my help. Even my family, to a large extent, turned on me. They thought, the line of thinking was that this is something Aric needs to go through. Let him figure it out. So you can imagine a 20-year-old guy here, broke, penniless, on the ground. And some of you were at the retreat, and I shared this story. How I was at the lowest of lows. Everything that I had worked for, the path that I had had, was gone. And it was at that time, and the only time in my entire life, and I'm a pastor and I'll say this, the only time that I can actually tell you I actually heard a voice. And the voice said this, it says, stop making me your part-time crutch and make me your full-time pursuit. And I said, thank you, God, for being so clear about that. I have no idea what that means. And I didn't know what it meant at the time. All I knew was that that burning bush had come and it was going to send me on a detour. I wanted to zig, he made me zag. And even years later, as I went to seminary, as my own personal spiritual journey, I swore I was never going to be a pastor. And I never in a million years, if you had talked to that 19-year-old, 20-year-old guy in New York City, broke, penniless, friendless, almost familyless, and if you had said that I would be where I am today. See, it doesn't mean that all stories have happy endings, but it means this: the burning bush in your life is going to necessarily put you on a detour. It's going to call you in a new direction. And the reason why is because the burning bush for Moses was an indication that there was much more for his life than just sheep. There was much more for him in his life that God wanted than just wilderness for this time. There's a line that I love from C.S. Lewis: if I find in myself desires which nothing in this world could satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. See what he's saying? Your burning bush right now in your life, it's telling you you're made for something bigger, better, different. Doesn't mean go to seminary. Please don't do that. I did that, but you don't do that. Do something different. Your burning bush will send you on a different direction. Don't send it to seminary necessarily. We'll talk about that if you want after service. But your burning bush will send you. It will turn you aside, and you must turn aside to it. Moses had every excuse not to go to the burning bush. He had every excuse to say, I want no part of this. A burning bush that is not consumed by fire, get it away from me. But it says that he took heed. He turned aside. He stopped working. He took moments to think about this, to ponder this bush that was burning. It's not just the bush that's burning that's going to get your attention. Spiritual encounters with God are going to derail you a little bit. I know I'm not selling it too well, am I, this morning? You're like, Pastor, you're telling me that God's going to send me on a path that I don't want to go on an exit ramp that's too early from where my destination's supposed to be. I don't like it. Well, it's about to get a little bit worse before it gets better. Because it's not only just the bush that's burning, but it's the bush that burns. What do I mean? God comes as fire. And if you look throughout the Old Testament, God is constantly coming in the form of fire. This bush is burning. It is literally on fire. When God leads his people through the wilderness, the Shekinah glory comes as a pillar of fire. When he comes down on the mountain, it says fire. Why fire? Why does God choose fire to represent himself? It's because fire burns. Contrast this. Water. You can change water. You can put your hand in water and change it. You can't change fire. You can try to extinguish it, yes, but you can't materially change it by sticking your hand in. In fact, that'd be utter foolery to do. Most of you have been to my house, and you know that my pride and joy is a water tank. I'm an aquarium. I talk about it a lot. I love it. It's my place of peace and zen, and I love seeing all my little fishies run around. Lately, my fish have gotten an attitude with each other, and they started trying to eat each other. And then I have 2 corals that try to eat each other. One actually did. It's really sad. So what I have to do periodically is I have to stick my hands in the water, and I have to move around things so the little fishies will stop picking on each other. And I have to shoo a little fish this way and shoo a little fish that way. And I have to push one over here and move around. If my tank was filled with fire, I know the fish would die, but work with me on the metaphor here, the illustration. If my tank was filled with fire, I couldn't do that. I can move water. I can change water. But God is saying, listen, I'm the fire in your life that you can't change. You don't burn me, I burn you. I burn away all the stuff in your life, he says. And this is why, do you notice, when Moses starts complaining, Moses starts whining. I wish I could have done a little whining noise when I read. Moses starts saying, but if I go back to the people, what are they going to say? I can't do this. No. He says, what do I say your name is? And God gives one of the greatest, coolest answers in the world. When he looks at him and he says, I am that I am. Do you know what he's saying? He's saying, you don't get to name me. You don't get to change me. You don't get rights over me, God says. I have rights over you. I am the fire that will come down into your life, the spiritual detour that'll probably knock you off the road of where you think you're going. And I'll burn everything around you, and it might be a little painful, God says. Try this next time. It's a really cool party trick. Go up to somebody at a party that you don't know and try to introduce yourself. Shake their hand and get their name. And they say, well, my name is Susie. And they look at you and they say, what is your name? And you say, I am that I am. Try it next time. It really I haven't tried it on anybody, but I imagine it would freak somebody out. Because if you came up to somebody and said, I am that I am, it sounds entirely arrogant. What you're saying is, you don't get to name me. You don't even get to know my name. I am who I am. You don't change me. I change you, God says to Moses. I'm the fire that burns. I'm the fire that'll melt away everything else in your life that you hold dear if you take heed of this burning bush. He pushes back on God. And God says, I am that I am. He whines about the burning bush and where it's going to send him, because he knows that he's got to go talk to the most important person in the world and the most powerful nation. And he's scared, and rightfully so. But God says, don't you know that in the midst of you being scared, I am still that I am? You can push back on me, but you don't own me. I'm not water that's malleable, God says. I'm fire that will come to you and burn away everything. Fire is beautiful, it is attractive, but it is deadly and fatal and scary sometimes. My favorite part, which they butchered in the movie, they kind of neutered it in the Chronicles of Narnia. I say this a lot. That's in the book, it's captured the best way. And the kids, Susan and Peter and Lucy, they haven't met Aslan yet, and they're talking about who he is to Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. They've just heard about Aslan as a concept. They don't know who he is yet. They haven't met him face to face. Sound familiar? They haven't had an encounter with this great character, Aslan. And Mr. Beaver, Susan says, well, is he a man? And Mr. Beaver sternly replies, Aslan a man? Certainly not. I tell you, he is the king of the wood and the son of the great emperor beyond the sea. Don't you know who is the king of beasts, he says? Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Ooh, said Susan. I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I felt real nervous about meeting a lion. That you will, dearie, and make no mistake, Miss Beaver chimes in. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or else just silly. Then Lucy says, then he isn't safe? Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Didn't you hear anything that Mr. Beaver just told you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he ain't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. He says safe. He's fire. He's a lion. Safe? Of course not. Approach him with knees knocking. But he's good. He's the king. Now, if I've done my job, none of you like what I've been saying. Because what I've said is that the burning bushes that come into your life, if you pray for a real spiritual encounter with God like Moses did, and you all have burning bushes in your life, I have them, you've had them. What I've just told you is that the burning bush is going to distract you and detour you from the plans that you've made out. The best laid plans of mice and men will go awry. He will be sending you in another direction. And not only will he do that, but he'll be the fire that burns you. It'll feel almost like it's burning you. Is he safe? No. Your knees will be knocking. And you look at me and you say, Pastor, you've really done a poor job selling this morning. I mean, who wants this? Burning bush, I'll go the other way. Because it is a bush that's burning, and it will take you to a different path. And it is a bush that burns. He is fire. He doesn't change. You change. And you say, that sounds horrible. I don't like it. But you have to see the last part. And this is the coolest part of all. It is a burning bush, and it is a bush that burns, but it's not a bush that ultimately burns. Look at this. Go back to your passage. Moses. He says, stop, Moses. Take off your shoes. Why? Not because you're about to step on holy ground, but because you are right now on holy ground. And do you know what the significance of this is? Everybody who encounters God face to face is consumed. Moses later on can't even look at the face of God. He has to watch his backside go by because it will kill him. The very glory of God. He is a fire. He does burn. He's too much for you and me to handle. He's too big. He's too strong. He'll burn you down. Yet Moses doesn't burn. Moses doesn't die. And you have to start thinking that's a little odd. Because when God comes into my life and he starts knocking around things and rearranging the furniture, it feels like I'm going to die. And God says, yes, it most certainly may feel like you're losing everything in your life, but you won't lose the ultimate thing. Look at Moses. Here he stands, and he's not burned. He's not consumed. He's scared, and he should be. But this is not the stereotypical Old Testament God who everybody says, he shall smite thee. Moses is not smitten, smited. I don't even know what the past tense of it is. Moses he's not smited. He's living. Why? Let me tell you another little story before I answer that question. And it's about myself, and then we're done talking about me. Most of you have seen my 4-year-old daughter, and she's 4 going on 14, and I realized that every time I give an illustration about her at church, it's usually something negative. So let me put this disclaimer out there. She is, objectively speaking, the greatest daughter in all the world. I can say that hands down. She is the greatest little girl, most well-behaved, perfect. I love her to death. So don't get me wrong here. But she's a 4-year-old, and 4-year-olds can push your buttons. And if you don't have a 4-year-old right now, you'll learn. And she knows how to push my buttons. And there's plenty of times that I give her a directive. Go here, do that. And she looks at me and says, no. Or she looks at me and says, why? Or she looks at me and says, I don't know. And it infuriates me. It does. Like any father or parent, I get upset and I probably get red in the face. And you might ask, then why don't you let the consuming fire of your fatherdom come down on her? How dare she disagree with you? Here's why. It's because she has an access to me that nobody else does. There's something in our relationship between the father and the daughter that she has, that she can push back. She can do like Moses does and whine. Although it infuriates me, it doesn't make me consume her over with fire. And God does not consume Moses over with fire. But why? Because Moses gets an access to him that is beautiful and very easy to miss. If you go back to the beginning of the story, do you notice who the first character is in the bush? The angel of the Lord. Not an angel, not some angel, the angel. And if you go through the Old Testament, you'll see this in Genesis, you'll see this, the angel appears to Abraham when he says, don't kill Isaac. The Abraham appears in Judges, Exodus, Zechariah, 2 Samuel. You'll have these really kind of cryptic, almost mystical appearances of the angel appearing. And it says, the angel appears in the bush, and the bush does not burn Moses. The angel. Who's the angel? The angel is the one that says, I am. I am that I am, the angel says. Fast forward many years later, and if you go to the book of John in chapter 8, you get this interesting dialogue between a man and some Jewish people who were trying to test him a little bit. Let me read this to you. This man, of course, is named Jesus. And Jesus says to them, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God, but you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and keep his word." He looks at them and Jesus says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" And pay attention, this is in your outline. In verse 58, Jesus looks at them and says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." He doesn't say before Abraham was, I was, which would mean that he's some thousands of years old, probably. He doesn't say before Abraham was, I is, which would be horrible grammatical English. I don't know how that would sound in Aramaic when Jesus would say it. He doesn't say I was, he doesn't say I is, he says I am. Funny how that works. Do you see who the angel of the Lord is? The angel of the Lord is the being that comes between you and the fire. The angel of the Lord is the thing that mediates for you, between you and the fire. You may feel that it's burning everything in your life away, that the burning bush, that whatever it may be, your spiritual encounter with God, the detour that he sent you on is absolutely crippling you and crumbling you. And it should to Moses. It should consume him alive. And it doesn't. Why? Grace. The angel of the Lord is between him and the fire. The angel of the Lord is the one who protects him from the fire. Jesus is the I am. I am that I am. Jesus says, that's who I am. If you want to know that God has got you through everything, that he'll take you through the fire, he'll take you through your burning bushes, he'll send you on a detour, and you can do it and you'll be okay. Do you know how? Because the fire came down on the I am on the cross. Jesus was the I am. He was there in the bush. He was there as the angel of the Lord. And he was there on the cross to say, this is a holy and a burning God. Yes. But it's a God of grace who puts something in the middle between you and him. And you know what he'd put? He put his son Jesus. And we know that fire literally came down on him because he went to hell for you and me. He took the fire. So you know what this means? I know I'm talking burning bushes and illustrations and metaphors. Let's make it very practical. If God right now is telling you to do something in your life that you feel, if you go on that detour, if you take that exit ramp, it's going to utterly consume you. You know that it can't consume you. You know nothing can. Because the ultimate fire already took the great I am and killed him instead of us. Something beautiful to stand between you and God. Yes, approach him. Your knees should be knocking. Is he safe? No, but he's good. He's the king. And he took the flames for you so that you know you can never be consumed by anything. He's good. He's the king. Go to him in prayer now.